The only certain barrier to truth is the belief that you already have it. And this week's opening quote comes from Voltaire. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Egan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. What if everything we ever thought to be true turned out to be a lie? And what if this world and everything we think about reality turned out to be very different to what we believe it to be? Asking questions and encouraging other people to ask questions as well. It's just the approach that I have. And I'm not afraid to ask the weird questions as well. I'm not afraid to think outside the box and to ask some very strange things sometimes. Well, things that may appear strange to the listener anyway. But that's just the way I prefer to approach things. I mean, you never teach anybody anything by attempting to convince them of the truth in what you believe you know to be true. You teach them by encouraging them to ask the questions and think for themselves in the first place.
Transmission of sound. Every sound is produced by a vibration. Vibration is the back and forth movement of an object. As you speak, vibrations are produced by the vocal cords in the throat. You can hear only when the sound energy reaches your ears. But how does sound energy travel? Wonder how that works? Come, let's go across to Dr. Zook. Sound energy travels in the form of sound waves. There are mainly two types of waves, transverse wave and longitudinal wave. Let us see how waves travel. We can use a slinky spring to observe both types of waves. Emily is holding one side of the slinky, while Dr. Zook is holding the other end. With a quick upward flick of the wrist, Dr. Zook has sent energy traveling through the slinky. Notice how the slinky moves? This is a transverse wave. In a transverse wave, the particles vibrate at a right angle to the direction of the wave. The wave traveled from Dr. Zook to Emily and back. Now let's see what a longitudinal wave looks like. Emily is holding one end of the slinky, while Dr. Zook is pulling its other end towards himself and then pushing it towards Emily. Watch closely, and you will notice that some of the coils crowd close together and then slowly move farther apart. This is because the vibrations are parallel to the direction of the wave. If the wave moves from right to left, then the particles also vibrate from right to left. This is a longitudinal wave. Sound waves are longitudinal waves. These waves travel at different speeds in different mediums. The medium could be a solid, liquid, or gas. Now let's see how this works. In a solid, the particles are very close together. Sound energy moves as one particle hits the other particle. With the particles being so close together, sound travels quickest through a solid. If we look at particles in a liquid, they appear to be slightly further apart when compared to solid. Thus, sound energy takes a little longer to travel through a liquid. Look at the particles of gas. They are spread out, and hence, sound waves travel most slowly through them. Now we know how sound travels in different media. The vibration of particles produces waves. Wavelength is the distance between two consecutive compressions or rarefactions. The number of waves passing through a point in a second is called frequency, and it is measured in hertz. Sound waves travel in all directions.
Emily?
Sound gets reflected. That is, it bounces back on hitting a solid surface. Bouncing back of sound is called echo.
Bouncing back of sound is purposefully used in detecting depth of seabeds.
That's amazing, isn't it? Summary: every sound is produced by a vibration. Vibrations are produced by our vocal cords when we speak. There are two types of waves, transverse wave and longitudinal wave. In a transverse wave, the particles vibrate at a right angle to the direction of the wave. In a longitudinal wave, vibrations are parallel to the direction of the wave. Sound waves are longitudinal waves. Sound travels quickest through a solid. Wavelength is the distance between two consecutive compressions or rarefactions. The number of waves passing through a point in a second is called frequency, and it is measured in hertz. Bouncing back of sound is called echo.
Countless museum artifacts also that, according to these same individuals, regardless of the obvious precision contained within, were created by individuals far less capable than we are today, often absent or attached to illogical explanations as to their manufacture. These artifacts continue to be attributed to civilizations whose most advanced carving technologies were copper and stone chisels. We feel that many of these ancient artifacts, along with many impossible ancient megaliths found perfectly placed within ancient ruins all over the world, are strong evidential factors to suggest that an ancient civilization once had at their disposal highly advanced precision machinery. One of the many interesting, perplexing ancient features are the ancient star holes, which have been discovered at a number of different ancient sites around the planet. Although places like Puma Punku or Giza's basalt plain possess precision drill holes, diving many feet into incredibly hard stone, these star holes are, as the title suggests, mysteriously created in the shape of stars. So far found within Massachusetts in the USA, and also within Volda in Norway, their existence, we feel, are proof of an ancient drilling technology, far superior to our own today, let alone our recent ancestors. How were these holes created, or indeed why? A number of these particular drill holes can be found within Volda, and a number have also been discovered within the surrounding area of Flint County Quarry, Massachusetts, although, interestingly, each slightly different in shape.
We are in Mahabalipuram in India, and I'm going to show you some ancient drilling that's even stranger. How about drilling a giant hole that is 8 feet wide on a granite rock? As we know, granite is one of the hardest rocks in the world, and today we use diamond-tipped tools and laser to make drills in it. How could they drill a humongous hole like this 1300 years ago? With a diameter of 8 feet, you can see how perfect it looks.
It's a neat demonstration called acoustic propulsion. I've got two very simple Christmas ornaments, spherical bulbs that the same shape and size, so they have the same frequency. They act as spherical Helmholtz resonators. I've got them suspended from a string connected by a thin rod, suspended over a loudspeaker. And when I take the loudspeaker and drive it at the resonance frequency of the two spherical Helmholtz resonators, well, see what happens. The asymmetry in the momentum flow in and out of the Helmholtz resonators because of the sound waves and the vortex shedding at the edge of the opening causes the two balls to rotate or propel each other because of the sound that's being radiated by them. Acoustic propulsion.
And here's some basics from old Soviet movie, Russian movie about acoustics. Physical basics of acoustics. It's cool. It's 1960 something. It's a saying about interference when two sound waves put together and how it's so-called standing wave is arranged. So you can see high density and in dark when it's low frequency and low density. And here sound can regulate how gas goes in the pipe. You can see this experiment back in 1960s when they modulate signal using this frequency generator, and that's how sounds can influence on the gas flow. And you can see also the same on thematic music wave. It's modern You've seen it all in previous my video. And you have just seen how sound can regulate gas flow, and now you can see how sound can regulate something physically. Helmholtz resonators can influence, they can somehow rotate those wheels.
Потоки воздуха, возникающие при этом, вращают индикаторы.
Different resonator resonate with different sound wave length and of course rotate different wheels. And this is about
ультразвук большой мощности вызывает кавитацию, процесс, при котором непрерывно образуются и исчезают внутренние разрывы.
in water.
Этот опыт снимался в лаборатории технологии металлов Московского автодорожного
Microwave
института.
cavitation.
Исчезновение
Back in
разрывов
60s.
сложности жидкости
Once again,
сопровождается
very
кратковременным
poor,
возрастанием
very small
давления
amount of
до
energy
многих
applied,
сотен
but
атмосфер.
huge reaction.
Это явление придает ультразвуку в жидкости
Ultrasound.
дробящие свойства.
Look, it
Такой стало
Influence
длительного
on
воздействия кавитации
metals.
поверхность излучателя. Сегодня кавитацию используют
another way
для
of
очистки
using
металла.
cavitation in industry to treat difficult
Ультразвук
metals,
большой
even
мощности
metals.
позволяет вести
Drill
механическую
holes.
обработку материалов, отличающихся высокой твердостью.
High
В этом случае
density
между излучателем
crystals,
и обрабатываемой
metals.
деталью
I remind,
находится
it
жидкость
was
с
in 60s,
мелкодисперсным абразивом.
50 years ago. Any type of shape,
С помощью
In shape
ультразвука можно
of
получать
holes.
отверстия самой разнообразной конфигурации.
different configurations, they say. And here another example of using ultrasound,
На
ultrasonic
этих
waves
станках ультразвуком сваривают пластмассу.
to
В
weld
случае поглощения
at least
ультразвука
plastic,
приводит к нагреву
but they
материала
can
и его
use
плавлению.
to weld any material actually, as you will see in the future. And of course organs, they talk a lot about organs, but not in this movie, it's too much for this
Люди
movie.
занимались еще в глубокой древности, открывает перед нами все новые и удивительные возможности.
John Keeley got into the middle of his vibration research, and he discovered that to really unleash the forces in the universe, we have to work with sympathetic vibrations. And I'll talk to you about those and what they are and why they are. They're very much like resonance, but they're not resonance. Very similar to that. Is there anyone in the audience who hasn't heard of John Keeley, doesn't know what he did? Quite a few. Mr. Keeley was born in 1837 near Philadelphia. As a youngster, he was always interested in sound and music and vibration, things of that nature, especially during church when he saw the windows vibrate when the choir sang. And he got real curious about what caused that resonance in the windows. And that began his long career. One of the most fantastic scientific researchers in history was this man, John Keeley, and he kind of got buried. He died in 1898, but that brief period from the 1860s, late 1860s to 1890s, he did an incredible amount of research into vibration, molecular and atomic structures. He worked with radioactivity, or radiation rather, not radioactivity as we know it. It was quite a bit different. His was benign, was absolutely harmless when understood and worked with properly. Several times he blew the back end of his laboratory out, so it can be very dangerous. And he was the expert, and he kept losing it once in a while. He only had enough of it to keep building new machines and older machines. This particular motor operates on water and sound. He made 129 versions of this motor. We don't know which model this one is, although we're pretty sure it was one of the later versions. It was very, very refined. The one single patent that Keeley filed that we've been able to locate was filed in 1874 on this motor, but it was a very crude design. Fundamentally, this motor would draw in water, just plain old water, into itself using a vacuum, and I'll explain the different components to it as we go along. Once the motor got to vibrating, and it would start to vibrate on its own, this water would begin to pulsate. And pulsations in a water stream is called water hammer. When you shut off a water stream, you get this water hammer effect. And that is where an etheric vapor is evolved in the process of water hammer. This is technically known today as cavitation. There's 4 types of cavitation, one of which is called acoustic cavitation, which is what's used in this motor.
which causes diamagnetism. Quantum mechanics tells us that everything in the universe is a wave, and thus has its own frequency. Well, let's think about the table on that your computer monitor sits on for 1 second. Is that a wave? Well, actually, it is. The table, the board that has a frequency, usually a couple different frequencies. The more complex the geometry of the object, the more frequencies needed to describe the object. We'll start with a simple object, like a long flat board, and we'll compare it with a really, really long flat board. The man holding the longer flat board will shake his much slower than the man with the shorter one. This is because the object's frequency along a particular axis, say the one to the length, going along the length of the board, is inversely proportional to the length of the board itself. So the longer the board, the lower the frequency. The shorter the board, which it can effectively be thought of as a wavelength itself, the higher the frequency. Small objects require a much higher frequency than you could shake it at, so you could use a motor or a guitar string to vibrate them. I suggest you study everything you can on waves. I can't go over everything in this video because I'm going to have to show how they describe all these different effects. So I want you to read up on waves so you can understand how the wavelength is related to the frequency, and most importantly, so you will understand resonance and bass frequency, not BASS, B-A-S-E, bass frequency, and harmonics. Harmonics, like first, second, third, they go all the way up in music anyway until it gets too high for you to hear. Harmonics explains why a guitar's 12th fret is always at the exact halfway point between the bridge and the neck. You divide a wave in half and go up an octave, and multiply by 2 to go down an octave. Waves and resonance can be effectively and incredibly powerful. Take, for example, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, or Tesla's earthquake machine. At one point, this phenomenon is only observed while using ultra-high frequency and incredibly high frequency Tesla waves. Why? Because they correspond to the frequency of the distance in the atoms in the structure. The distance between the atoms in a structure is equal to the wavelength, which will resonate that structure. Once you find the resonant frequency with the Tesla waves, you have effectively trapped and aligned the atoms. You can now tune the frequency a tiny bit higher, causing diamagnetism by squeezing the atoms together, restricting the electron orbits, which causes a north pole and a south pole, artificially induced diamagnetism, which causes levitation. If you lower the frequency, it pulls the atoms apart a tiny bit, which causes a phase change of matter, where a solid starts behaving like a liquid due to these strong electromagnetic forces resonating within it.
Just look at things objectively and keep an open mind in what you're researching. Because when all is said and done, folks, we don't really know what's going on because we simply don't have access to the right information. We've had so much information changed and stolen and taken from us, and history is very, very different to what we've been led to believe. Such as sound frequency technology. I've seen a lot of reports recently talking about the organs, the old pipe organs, and what these were really used for, whether they were in fact instruments that were used to create sound frequency that was used for healing. And this may sound preposterous to a lot of people, but these pipe organs in these cities and these small towns, it seems like every town has one as well. I've even got reports from little villages in Mexico that don't have very much there. They've got dirt roads and all sorts of stuff, but there'll be a church in the town which has a huge pipe organ. They don't really know where it came from, but it's there. And the question is, what was the real purpose of these instruments? Were they merely for creating music, or was it really a sound healing system that they had? And I'm reminded of things such as Royal Rife. He's someone that I've mentioned on the show many times in the past. Royal Raymond Rife was a man who found a way to cure all diseases way back in the 20s or 30s. I think it was in the 1930s or the 1940s, they actually had a banquet to celebrate the end of all disease due to the research and techniques that had been uncovered by Royal Raymond Rife, and he was curing incurable diseases. And he did it through sound frequency. He was able to identify viruses, live viruses in the body. He could view them with this microscope that he built. The Rife microscope was an absolutely incredible device which gave him the ability to be able to view viruses in real time. And what he would do, he would put a blood sample under the microscope and he would look at your blood sample and he would subject the sample to a series of light frequencies. Because every light you apply, when you go through frequencies of light and you put them on an object, different frequencies of light will illuminate different aspects of the object. Like if you put frequencies of light on a blood slide, different organisms or viruses or bacteria in the blood will become illuminated under certain lights. And Rife figured out that all you have to do is go through the light frequency until you find the light that illuminates the virus, and then find the corresponding sound frequency, bombard the virus with that sound frequency, and it will shatter like a crystal glass shatters on high C. When an opera singer hits high C, they can shatter a crystal glass. It's the same thing. It's the same principle. All you have to do is find the corresponding sound frequency, and you will create a feedback loop which will shatter the virus. And that's what Royal Rife figured out. So when you look at that, and you think of these organs and the sound that they produce and the healing that comes from sound, I mean, any people who've gone to sound healings know what I'm talking about. And sound healings may sound incredibly new age and airy-fairy to most people, but they do, in fact, work. So it's another very interesting thing to look at. And again, I find all of this sort of stuff quite intriguing and quite fascinating. And the concept that we had this ancient technology is really not so far-fetched. And when you think about it and you really consider the possibility that this technology has been stolen from us, it really does provide a whole new perspective to look at things from. And you think about these huge pipe organs in these churches, folks. Who built these things? I mean, these things are amazing, the construction of them. Some of them are absolutely huge. Who figured out the frequencies and who got it all that perfect? Who tuned it? And imagine the sound field that it would set up if you went through the entire keyboard and you created that level of sound. I mean, these things are incredibly loud. You could literally cover the entire village in a sound frequency. What if people went to these church buildings and they actually sat in the organ music, and the organ music healed them of all of the bacteria in their body every week when they went to these churches? Perhaps the churches were not places of worship, perhaps they were places of healing. Just a thought. And again, it may be a preposterous thought for a lot of people, but again, look at the detail of these organs, look at the detail that went into the construction of them, the meticulous workmanship of them, look at the detail that went into the construction of a lot of these buildings.
Usually I would be standing on this stage over here conducting the college orchestra because I'm a music professor. But tonight I'm going to talk about my moonlight activities in the field of science and how they led to a cancer research lab and an important breakthrough. Over the past 8 years, I've had the great pleasure of working with some brilliant and dedicated scientists. They were very open-minded, and we had a common dream that in the future, children would not have to suffer from cancer or from the terrible side effects of toxic drugs or radiation, because we believed there just had to be a better way. There had to be a better way, and we think we may have found it. A scientist said, "You're killing more cancer cells than as if you had used radiation." That same scientist went on, "If you had spent millions of dollars developing a new drug that killed this many cancer cells, it would be a home run." This was an astonishing thing to hear, especially for a music professor who had just completed his first experiments in a cancer lab. But we didn't use any radiation. We didn't use any drugs. So what did we do? I have here two identical tuning forks, both tuned to the note A, the note an orchestra tunes to. These forks are both made to vibrate 440 times per second. We say their frequency is 440 hertz. If I tap this fork, putting little pulses of energy into it, the second fork will also vibrate in sympathy. And if I silence this fork, we just may hear the other singing its tone. We say that I'm inducing a sympathetic resonant vibration in the second fork. It only works because both forks are tuned to the exact same frequency. Then he takes a deep breath and sings a loud, long note. He induces a resonant vibration in the crystal glass. The vibration grows larger and larger and larger until the glass is shattered. On the other end of the scale, we have a giant bridge made out of concrete and steel, a suspension bridge, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Cars and trucks and buses are going over it every day. And unfortunately, where they built this bridge, there was a steady wind blowing across it. And one day this wind induces a small vibration in the bridge, hardly noticeable. But the frequency of the vibration matches the resonant frequency of some part of the bridge. And the vibration gets larger and larger and larger until the bridge collapses into the river below. A destructive resonant frequency. So on one end of the scale, we have a giant concrete and steel bridge destroyed by resonance. And on the other, we have a small crystal glass shattered. So maybe we could shatter something even smaller, something really small, something you would need a microscope to see. Maybe we could shatter a living microorganism. It's called a resonant frequency therapy device, and its purpose is to induce a resonant vibration in a living organism or cell. 100 hertz, out will come 100 pulses per second. If I put in 200 hertz, we'll get 200 pulses. So now we're searching for the magic frequency. And we start with 100 hertz, and we look through the microscope to see if anything's happening. We watch for 5 minutes. Nothing happens. So we try 101 hertz. We look through the scope for 5 minutes, and nothing happens. So we try 102, 103, and so on. Over the course of 15 months, we try hundreds and hundreds of frequencies, if not thousands, until we find the magic combination. The answer is you have to have 2 input frequencies, one low, one high, and the higher frequency must be 11 times the lower. It's what we musicians would call the 11th harmonic. And when we add the 11th harmonic, we begin to shatter microorganisms like a crystal glass.
Some really exciting stuff for you guys. Scientists have discovered a way to destroy cancer tumors using nothing but sound waves, if you can believe that. And I've told you guys before, you know, in my opinion, everything in my experience is telling me everything is a frequency. We are a frequency. So this was from naturalnews.com, but it comes out of China. A multi-institutional research team from China developed a semi-enclosed spherical cavity transducer that can produce a focused standing wave field with a sub-wavelength scale focal region and extremely high ultrasound intensity. And basically what they're saying is a recent breakthrough in high-intensity focused ultrasound therapy technology has proven its use as an effective cancer treatment.
Hello everybody, back for another video, and today I'd like to talk about churches, and I'm going to be doing a little series on churches and this concept of churches as being machines and generating frequencies. So I was looking into cymatics, which is just the study of geometric patterns created by sound vibrations or frequencies. An article featuring this woman, Tanya Harris, and I believe she's based in London, and she's studying cymatics, and one of her experiments was to go into 4 separate churches, and they're called Hawksmoor churches because there was an architect by the name of Nicholas Hawksmoor, and I believe he was the chief architect for about 6 different churches in London. But she went into 4 of these churches, and she recorded the resonant frequencies in those churches. And then what she did was apply those frequencies to water, and it formed these specific patterns. So each church, or well, what we're told are churches, each church has its own unique resonant frequency. I mean, to me, that is really interesting. So, you know, our body is apparently 60% water, and specifically our brain is 73%, and the heart as well, 73%. So just being in that structure is having quite an effect. Yeah, so the study of cymatics reveals that sound vibrations excite matter in geometric forms. She placed the water inside a loudspeaker and then applied those frequencies to it, and that's how she noticed these particular cymatic patterns. So, inspired by Alvin Lucier, a music composer in the 60s, who discovered a technique to record the resonant frequencies of a space. So she began by recording the silence of each church for approximately 7 minutes. Then she played the recording of that back in the church and recorded that. And then she just repeated the process over and over again until the resonance of the space became audible, causing each church to reverberate, generating a physical experience of resonance. But if anyone gets inspired, this seems like something very doable. So definitely check this website out. This is it just kind of proves that these things are most likely machines, and they're producing an internal resonance that in turn is affecting you. Now, I don't personally know what effect is that having on the human body, but there's definitely going to be an effect.
A key threshold resonance, such as that moment right there. And in that key threshold resonance, the entire pattern morphed into a more complex expression of itself, simply because the frequency changed. Now watch what happens. The frequency is still increasing. Now watch what happens. As we reach another key threshold resonance, this entire pattern will morph into a beautifully and more complex pattern of itself. Again and again. And look at this pattern right here. Look what you're seeing right here. Look at the beautiful geometry. Here is a perfect cube. There's a perfect tetrahedron, a star tetrahedron. In 2 dimensions, we've got the octahedron. Very powerful images of sacred geometry held in place simply because we've achieved the vibratory pattern that allows that in this water droplet. And as the vibration increases, these patterns will become more and more complex. You can see the pulse from where you are. Can you see the pulse actually in the water? As we go into the last set of the frequencies, what you'll see is that the entire, and you'll watch along the outer perimeter, the entire pattern reaches its greatest level of complexity, and then it goes back. As the frequencies drop, it goes back to what it was, the concentric circles.
Hello guys, now let me continue. One guy I'm showing you pictures, his pictures. He made perfect pictures of water under resonance under some frequencies. And as we can see, the shape of rose windows in his works and the shape of water under some resonate frequencies are the same. This guy's name is Lyndon Glenhill. And amazing. What we see here is the shape of star forts and shape of so-called rose windows. So we know that each church has own resonate frequency. We know that these pictures of water just reflects and shows the shape of frequency actually. And we see this picture and picture of rose window. And it has the same pattern, the same picture, the same shape. Is it coincidence? I don't believe in any coincidence anymore. If you build something, even a stupid doghouse or a normal, ugly, two-story block flat, modern type, you also need a design, you need drawings, you need calculations. And we simply cannot copy or make such a beautiful building like churches, temples, and so on. We lost technologies, we don't have it. We lost a lot. You cannot imagine how much we lost. And look at this, increasing frequency, increasing patterns. The complication picture, more and more. Look, it creates energy, like I showed you in the previous movie about magnetron. It's designed for something, for some purpose, nothing for decoration. Everything has its purpose. Yes, it's beautiful, but it's done not for decoration. It's done to create energy from vibration, as we see. And now, analyzing the shape of some rose windows, we can understand what frequency is purposed for, what frequency this church is working on and working with. Yes, now all churches are switched off, but it wasn't like this always. Someday we will turn it back on again and we will understand how it works, and we will have proof how perfect everything was. I have no words to describe my feelings about all these recent discoveries, about these beauties. Everything was lost. And it's all about copying nature. It's all about beauty. It's all about frequency and vibrations. Just like Tesla said, everything based on vibration and feeling the nature, copying the nature and following it. It was ecological, clean energy, healing people, fulfilling our bodies, brains and cells with energy, healing everything on high frequency. Tesla said that highest frequency is God, frequency of God. So we were increasing our frequency, developing ourselves, getting rid of all bad habits and so on. It was totally different society, different principles, different economics and basement of living of all people. And when I compare what we have now to what we had, I understand that something is going wrong now, and I wanna do something about it. Join me if you want. Now let's get back to frequencies. You can search and look in materials. The materials I will provide you with some links, but you can make your own research. That's what I want you to do. Don't believe me, don't believe anybody. Turn your brain on again, wake up and learn something, talk about it, share this information, make your video about it. It's all up to you. If you don't help yourself, nobody will, trust me. Only we can help yourself. So let's do something together. Guys, I need your help. And let's get back to our frequencies. I can find photo of twin rose window and this pattern. For each of this pattern of this photo, I can make comparison and find the twin, the same shape of rose window, or rose window the same shape of each of those pictures. This guy, Glenn Hill.
It's a fun toy that shoots out a ring of air that travels for a surprisingly long distance. Let's try it out with the normal sized air bazooka. There you go, our regular air bazooka works pretty well. You can see how much it moves the curtain. It moves. Doesn't move nearly as much as it does with the bigger one, but it definitely moves. All right, I'm gonna try backing up from a little farther away and see how it does. Oh, there it is. Hot. Trying to hit the trees. Ha! 3, 2, 1. Nice. There you have it.
So what do we have here? We have one energy flow going from fractal antenna on top, going down through the 3 or 4 layers of resonators and resonating domes, going down, increasing severely, huge quantities, and it meets another vortex from down, increased by huge fractal antenna. And when they meet together, they collapse, or maybe they resonate. 1 plus 1 is not 2 when resonate, it's 22, 52, whatever. And energy appears from nothing, from space, from ether, and it needs to go out somewhere on certain frequency. How energy can go out? Where? It needs some kind of exhaust. It's a window, so-called rose window. Energy coming from nothing in huge quantities and goes out, as we realize now. Like we can see it in this short clip. When it resonates, space, energy, they meet each other and go out through the rose window, resonating on certain frequency in huge quantities. And it happens something like this. And what to do with this energy, we will talk later in our videos. Thank you guys, see you later.
Why do horns and musical instruments have this flared shape? To answer this question, about a year ago, I decided I would take this and scale it up to this. And I'm going to first talk about how hearing works and what I eventually learned about why horns have that curved shape. Let's say this jello block represents a volume of air molecules. If that horn diaphragm hits the jello molecules over here, there's a chain reaction of jello molecules crashing into each other until finally you see movement on the other side of the jello block. And this is where your eardrum is. So it moves back and forth at the same rate as the horn diaphragm because of all of these collisions of the jello molecules in between. This is called a pressure wave, and it's how sound travels through air. And so if the horn diaphragm is hitting the air molecules at a high frequency, or very frequently, our brain decodes that
as a high pitch.
But if the crashes are happening at a low frequency or less frequently, then our brain decodes that as a low pitch. Okay, but why the curvy horn shape? Well, that has to do with something called impedance matching. Basically, the horn diaphragm is very solid and strong, and it pushes against the air, which doesn't offer much resistance. It's not very effective, like trying to break a piece of paper by punching it. So without the curvy horn portion, as the diaphragm moves back and forth, it interfaces with the air sort of like this. You can still see the jellos moving on the opposite side, just not that much, because the air is just too thin and weak over this small of an area. So to have a better interface with the air, you put a big curvy shape right after the diaphragm. You can see now your eardrum is moving back and forth much more vigorously because the interface is so much better. So it sounds louder with a curved horn, not because you're amplifying the sound, but because you're conserving the sound. And this makes sense because amplifying means you're adding power to the system, and there's no battery or plugs at the curved section of a horn. It's passive. So by impedance matching, you give yourself a much larger area to push against all the air at the outlet, which makes for a more effective chain reaction of molecules crashing into your eardrum. If you want to break glass with what is essentially little puffs of air, the trick is to find out its resonant frequency. You actually know all about this if you've ever used one of these. I can make Eliza go really high with just a little force. Now if I apply that force at random intervals, it doesn't do very much. It's not fun, huh? No, it's not fun. But if I apply that force equal to the timing of the natural frequency of the swing, those little pushes add to each other. And so in this case, the resonant frequency increased our fun, but if engineers don't take this into consideration, it could lead to disaster, such as when wind gusts going at just the right rate destroyed the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. It's also why soldiers don't march in unison when crossing a bridge. So if you measure the natural frequency of the glass with an accelerometer like this, then you just need to make sure your horn fires at that exact frequency or a multiple thereof. Or you can just change the natural frequency of the glass to match your horn by adding weights in the right spot.
And hello everybody, and Global Vision again. And tonight we're gonna talk about resonating frequencies as usual and how to tune it. If such a small horn can shatter huge, very fat glass, so why huge domes of so-called churches do not resonate with the building, do not destroy anything, do not shatter glasses, window glasses, and other, the whole constructions. And I want you to think about next thing. As you see, it's a drawing of domes in one of the churches in St. Petersburg. It's so-called Isaaki Cathedral. And it's huge. It's about 30 meters in diameter, 70 meters tall, and so on. It's really high and huge. And it's 3 layers of domes. Outer dome completely made of copper. In between the middle dome is many layers of copper and amalgama. Amalgama is a mix of mercury and gold. So first question, where they got mercury at least 300 years ago and pure copper? That's the first question. Second, why they did such a huge work? For nothing, no practical use of it. Because one dome is enough to cover from rain and so on. For building, one roof is enough. Why they made 3? Of course, now we understand it's a huge capacitor condensator. And we see 3 different size, different shape of domes. It's perfect metals, pure metals. They transmit signal and energy. They transmit all kinds of energies, and inside, in between domes, they have ceramic pots. First of all, it can be for isolating, but it's not for warm isolation or electrical isolation. It's for tuning, like Helmholtz resonators. Try to understand. More than 100,000 ceramic pots were used in between domes. What for? Later you will understand why it's important and what is the function of those pots. And when I look at this, the first question is, what industry was capable to do it? Because they need pure metal engineering school, huge institutes and design institutes to do it. Because it's not coincidence. All these ceramic pots, as you can see, a lot of them. You will see photos. Photo of the inner dome, in between. How perfectly it was done. Everything is grounded with metallic connections and wires. It's perfect steel. And as you see, it's one of the first drawing of these domes. It's lithography, so-called lithography. Look at this beauty. Look at these holes in metallic construction. Only in 1943, one guy, I forgot his name, designed and calculated the opportunity of this. Look at these perfect rivets. Opportunities of making holes. Now, take a look at this. Another. What is left of the so-called church, temple? It's somewhere in Tula, in Russia, near Tula. But why is this so interesting? Because it's not typical church, and it's 50% ruined, demolished. They tried to demolish it, explode it, put some explosions inside, and only 25% was demolished. Huge amount of explosive was in there. It still remains. Now, take a look. Communists tried to destroy this building. They failed. Now, what is interesting? Cross is not really interesting, but I want to to understand how everything was. Now we can see what is inside, how this all worked, how it was fixed. And of course, bricks of perfect quality bricks. They're standing for 200 years or something. After all many years, without any heating, under the rain, under the snow, under the ice and so on. But I want you to go inside virtually with me. A couple of minutes later we will do it, and I will explain why it's so interesting. What we can see there, what we cannot see in acting churches, in normal churches. What's good? Of course we see metallic, it's grounding. Grounding for wires, for connection, for transmitting energies, power and so on. A lot of them. And a lot of resonators, as you can see on the pictures showing now. I will tell you what is common between these dormers, still resonators, and what I saw interesting in this building. Right under the dome, under the main dome, here we see so-called holes. It's also ceramic pots inside the wall. Sound is very interesting. We know that we can use sound for making holes. We know from their very old black and white movie that we can use sound for many different applications. Why I'm telling you? Because here Helmholtz resonators, or Helmholtz cameras as we call them, they resonate on certain frequency. It's not necessary for them to be built of metal. They can be made on any material, the best ceramics, of course. And I saw it's not simply ceramical pots inside the wall. They are for some purpose. They tune the whole dome. And I'll show you some photos. They the same way like these dormers, windows under their roof. Look at this. When they put some pots in the walls to tune the domes, because otherwise it will not resonate on right frequency. Later I will explain you why it's so important. And this dome roof must be tuned on right frequency. As you can see here, we are visualizing the process of tuning. You can catch from so-called white noise from radio with all frequencies, the right frequency you need. You concentrate all frequencies into one. All vibrations you collect from many different ranges into one. Look at this. They were inside during construction. And then you see this resonator. And now you will understand. Let this guy talk and you will understand why it's important to tune the huge dome on the right frequency.
See what happens. Alright, moving at a high frequency. Well, there's a little jiggling here because this is, an imperfect model, but basically that base radiator doesn't move much at all. Now, here, I've lowered the frequency. Now we're in the base region. And look what's happening. A very small amount of movement of my hand produces a tremendous amount of movement on the part of the light bulb. Alright, see that all happening? And we'll go back to the high frequency. It doesn't move much. Lower frequency moves a ton. Alright, so what this means is that we've got a very highly efficient acoustical system where a very small amount of energy in the active driver produces a tremendous amount of excursion or movement in the base radiator. So that's the technology behind base radiators. They give you better bass, more efficiently with lower distortion. And of course that's a great thing. And you're going to find them in Definitive Technology loudspeakers. Thanks for watching.
And here we will try to tune the huge speaker system with low frequency speaker system on some certain frequency. Now it's we can see it's tuned on this one frequency about, let's find out, 45 or something. When we send a signal 45 Hz, it doesn't resonate. When we close resonator, this dormer in the building, we change frequency, it starts to shake again. The same, imagine this is building and the dome, huge dome in the church. The same situation. And we can change the frequency, as you can see here, by playing with the size, diameter or length of this resonator, this so-called domer. Look at this. Now I understand why they were built. When you produce free electricity using the roof, domes, you need it to tune it and to prevent destruction, destroying of the whole building, the walls, because vibration will kill it. And as you see with this rise, it's very good indicator. It's perfect. A very smart decision. He is changing tuning frequency by simply using these pipes, this paper or plastic pipes, whatever. And as you can see, he will change it to 36 from 45, just changing the diameter of this so-called bus reflex. We call it phase inverter. Doesn't matter how to call it, you understand the idea. It would be really silly to think that people, our grandfathers, could build such a huge and beautiful buildings without knowing the basics of acoustics, basics of vibrations and energy flows. They knew much more than we know now. Now we're really stupid, we're like monkey compared to them. Look at them. Frequency is really important, as you can see. If you cannot tune it to right frequency, first of all, you will not get high efficiency in creating electricity. See what will happen. Less power, less electricity, because it's all about vibrations.
Passive radiator is used to increase loudspeaker sensitivity on low frequencies. They achieve that by using the energy from the rear side of the driver's diaphragm and inverting its phase. Physics behind that is relatively simple. When the diaphragm of the active driver moves inwards, it compresses the air inside the enclosure. This will push out the suspended mass, which is the diaphragm of the passive radiator. This mass has its inertia though, so it takes some time to get it to move or change the direction of the movement. By the right combination of parameters like enclosure volume and the weight of the moving mass, at the right frequency you'll achieve that both active and passive diaphragms move inwards and outwards in phase. Above the tuning frequency, the changes in internal pressure are too quick for the passive radiator to react, so enclosure acts just like if it was completely sealed. Below the tuning frequency, things are much more dramatic. The lower the frequency goes, the higher the phase shift is, and eventually it reaches 180 degrees, so passive and active driver cancel each other out.
Or any other speakers, passive radiator technology. Now, what does that mean? Why do companies keep, going on and on and on about these passive radiators? I know JBL, pretty much the whole fleet uses passive radiator technology. But what actually is it? So, in this video, obviously, as the title suggests, I will explain and demonstrate how passive radiator technology works. So here we have a Flip 3, obviously with the cover off, so I can show you all the components. So here you have two 40mm speakers, full range speaker drivers. But on the ends is the passive radiator technology that everyone's going on about. Now, how this works is you've got the two speakers here, driven by the amplifier, of course, in the back of the speaker. Now, if you look around the speaker here, there's no holes, it's a completely sealed unit. There's a very good reason for that, because in order for the passive radiator technology to work, it has to be a sealed unit, because how it works is these speakers, doing their normal job, obviously, will vibrate to create the sound. Now, if you have a sealed unit, these speakers will vibrate. They will make air pressure in the body of the speaker here, which will then drive the passive radiators. So, as you can see, if I push both in, the speaker cones come out. If I release, the speaker cones go back in. Same thing on this side. If I push the other passive radiator, that one moves. And it's all to do with the air pressure inside the speaker. The reason the companies use these is because they can extend the lower frequency range of the device. So rather than having a ported system with these types of speakers, obviously it's not going to sound that great. But with passive radiator technology, it makes it sound a lot better. So what I'll do now is I will play a song on the system with both speaker cones intact in the device, and then I will play the same section of the track with one speaker cone removed, because if I remove one speaker cone, it will break that air seal, which is crucial to how this system operates, and it does sound very, very, very harsh and tinny and downright disgusting. So I'll see you in the next clip. Okay, so this is what the Flip 3 sounds like with the passive radiator technology. So, as you saw, two speaker cones moving, creating the air pressure in here, which in turn was moving the passive radiators on the end, and also shaking the camera a little bit. Now, in the next clip, you'll see one speaker removed, as I said earlier, and you'll be able to hear the stark contrast between a brilliant sounding speaker and a really awful sounding speaker. I will play it while holding the speaker in to keep the air pressure, and then I will release it and take the speaker out so you can hear the difference. Here we go. So as you can hear and see, we stop because I broke the air pressure, speaker's still vibrating exactly the same. As soon as I put that back in, there we go. So there you go. Very, very simple and effective way to just increase the bass on a small speaker system without really compromising power, because it's all powered by the two speakers there.
And as you have just seen, it explains everything for everyone who has brain. So-called Rose window. It's another proof that Rose window is not just window. It's something to let energy pass through the wall, go out, exchange energies and vibration, and harvest energy using vibrations and sound. It's needed to increase the capacity of the whole system. And the old so-called Gothic cathedral with all these antennas, phase array antennas and frequency generators, were creating huge amount of energy using the whole building, antennas and passing vibrations and sounds, frequencies, in and out, up and down, and so on. We don't know how it works, but we will find out early or later. We are waking up, guys. And you see, I show you the parallel between speaker system, some of them, section of them, and the sections of so-called Gothic cathedral. I think the parallel is clearer. And it's not very necessary to be connected for second pass radiator. Another way to tune it, even with active or with passive speaker, is to put the second one the same size close. Just look at this. Now I understand why always, at least in many of cases, we have some term for resonating. Domes of these crosses, they're close, two of them in all Gothic cathedral. It's normally two towers, so-called with fractal antenna, the same size. They help to resonate each other. And even if one is off, not working, it works better when they are together in couple. They are resonating. Just look, listen, quality of the sound. With the second one working together and without. And even I have no music here, so-called. I cannot hear tones and so on, but even I hear that sound. It sounds different when it's two of them working, and one of them not connected, no electricity applied. Well, we need to put second one. Now I understand why we have two of them, and if it's one big, look, second small is close to catch harmonics, to catch echo and direct, and to resonate and to tune the bigger one, and they're all in layers. It's all perfect sacral geometry, and huge knowledge is behind it. Look at them, it's always, even if it's one dome, second is close, like in this case, in USA. And they say cowboys build it. Look, the small dome is somewhere close, always, to tune the big one. Thank you for today, and see you next time.
Oh